A show of support, this time from Sweden. We speak to Foreign Minister Joseph Wu about Europe's Taiwan awakening. A city destroyed. The mayor of Mariupol in Ukraine says Russia's siege has left more than 10,000 dead. A city in lockdown. We look at the cost of China's zero COVID policy in Shanghai. And abandonment issues. Unwanted pets are piling up in Taiwan, and now the government is stepping in. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. President Tsai has met with a visiting delegation from Sweden's parliament. The meeting was held online as the president is isolating due to COVID-19 contact tracing. The group arrived in Taiwan on Sunday, despite protests from China. Tsai thanked the group for their long-term friendship and support of Taiwan. The delegation's leader, Boriana Åberg, said Sweden has much to learn from Taiwan, and the two countries will work together to defend democracy and freedom.
We are convinced that our visit will strengthen the bond between our two countries and show that we, the Swedish parliamentarians, are prepared to do everything in our power to defend the existence and sovereignty of Taiwan.
Sweden is just the latest delegation to visit the country. Over the past year, despite the pandemic, there have been numerous European visits which have resulted in unprecedented economic and trade cooperation agreements. Foreign Minister Joseph Wu told TaiwanPlus's Divya Gopalan that he believes that China's aggressive responses to countries that don't fall in line with Beijing's policies, known as wolf warrior diplomacy, is helping turn democracies in Europe towards Taiwan.
And we saw that the resolutions are being passed by Ireland, by many other European countries, including Sweden. And now they are sending parliamentary delegations to visit Taiwan to show support. And I think these kinds of support are being seen by the Taiwanese people, and at the same time are being seen by the European audience. And therefore, there are more and more Europeans now understand that Taiwan is a very important partner and Taiwan's significance in their calculation. So this is the first part. And the second part is about China's wolf warrior type of diplomacy against the European countries. And the European countries now started to feel that it's enough for the Chinese government, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to do that kind of thing to the European countries. And in comparison, Taiwan is so nice, it's a good force for good in the world. And therefore, there's an awakening movement in Europe in general, not just in Brussels, but also in other capitals. They think that they want to be in a position to do more business or to have more relations with Taiwan.
But they have succeeded, and as you call it, wolf warrior diplomacy, they've succeeded in economic intimidation for some countries when these countries look to engage to Taiwan. But Taiwan has a number of allies that have remained steadfast. Can you tell us the importance of that, particularly those diplomatic allies that have remained a support for Taiwan?
I would like to stress that we have 14 diplomatic allies, and every one of them is very important for Taiwan for several reasons. The first reason, of course, is diplomatic recognition. When they recognize that Taiwan is an independent country with the name, with the national title, the Republic of China, that is significant itself. That Taiwan is not a country that is not totally unrecognized by the international community. We still have countries recognize Taiwan as independent. And the second is international participation. This is probably more important than ever. It is difficult for Taiwan to participate in some international organizations, especially the UN-related international agencies. And for us to be able to have our voice heard, we need to have friends and allies. And these diplomatic allies are constantly speaking out for Taiwan to be able to participate in these international organizations, in the UN, in the WHO, in ICAO, and etc. They say it in a very direct way, that Taiwan needs to have a seat, that Taiwan needs to be able to participate. The 23 million people should not be excluded by the international community or international organizations. And their support is so direct that we can keep our voice heard through the voice of our diplomatic allies.
Now, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's suddenly become much more tangible when you have an authoritarian neighbor that they could invade. What have our Taiwan's diplomatic allies been saying to you, or what's the messaging you're getting in terms of support, given now that this could be a very real, or at least a conflict in the horizon here in Taiwan?
Our diplomatic allies understand the situation Taiwan is in. Taiwan is being threatened by the big giant bully that is called China. And this is the same situation as Ukraine that is being threatened by a giant Russia. So the kind of situation has some similarities, even though Taiwan and Ukraine are very different from each other. And our diplomatic allies understand the situation Taiwan is in, and therefore they understand and they support Taiwan's endeavor in trying to provide support to Ukraine. And it's not just the Taiwanese government coming out in condemning the Russian actions or sanction Russia. It is also the general public.
The United States and the United Kingdom say they will investigate unverified reports that Russian forces used chemical weapons in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. It comes as France reportedly sent a police unit from its armed forces to Ukraine to investigate possible war crimes, the first time military personnel from a NATO country have been openly deployed in Ukraine. Rick Glowett reports.
Another plea for help from Ukraine's president and wartime leader, this time to South Korea's parliament.
Потребуємо систем протиповітряної оборони. Ми потребуємо літаків, танків, інша бронетехніка, артилерійські системи та боєприпаси. І у вас є те, що може бути незамінним для нас. У вас це є броньовані машини, протиповітряна, протитанкова, протикорабельна зброя. І коли стоїть питання про виживання у війні, направлені на повне підкорення народу, потрібно давати принципові відповіді. Звичайні правила постачання зброї потрібно переглядати і діяти швидко. Потрібно допомагати.
Despite South Korea sharing Ukraine's threat of a belligerent neighbor, Seoul's defense ministry previously rejected supplying anti-aircraft weapons to the war-torn country. But Zelensky is now warning of a new, more deadly threat to his people.
Один з рупорів окупантів заявив про те, що вони можуть застосувати хімічну зброю проти захисників Маріуполя. Розглядаємо це максимально серйозно. Хочу нагадати світовим лідерам, що можливе застосування хімічної зброї російськими військовими вже обговорювалося. І вже на той час це означало, що потрібно реагувати на російську агресію значно жорсткіше і швидше.
The UK and the US have said they are working to verify reports that Putin used chemical weapons in the southern Ukrainian city of Mariupol.
He and other senior Russian leaders have shown in the past, and you mentioned Syria as one example, have shown clearly in the past their disregard for avoiding civilian harm. Their utter disregard in many ways for the laws of war, laws of armed conflict, and the brutality with which they conduct and prosecute their operations. There's a track record here before Ukraine of Russian brutality. And you've seen it on display every single day of the last 46 days.
The region is on edge as Putin amasses his forces in the east. And a last-ditch diplomatic effort to curb bloodshed yielded little results.
Ich habe generell keinen optimistischen Eindruck, den ich Ihnen mitbringen kann von diesem Gespräch mit Präsident Putin. Die Offensive wird offensichtlich massiv vorbereitet. Deshalb aber auch das klare Eintreten dafür, dass es den Zugang des Internationalen Roten Kreuzes braucht, der stabil ist.
But for Ukraine, With more evidence of brutality and bloodshed emerging every day, the time for conversation is running out. Its leadership is now calling for concrete action from the international community. Alex Chen and Rick Glowert for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has released details of a new national defense handbook aimed at readying the population in the case of natural disasters or a foreign invasion. Taiwan's Defense Ministry launched the book on Tuesday with the entire guide now available on its website. Officials say the handbook provides guidance so people can be prepared for emergencies. The new handbook comes as China steps up its military activity near Taiwan. Government officials have made numerous public statements in recent months, signaling a need for heightened preparedness in case of a conflict. Shanghai's COVID-19 lockdown has, for some residents, entered a third week. With China's foremost commercial hub grinding to a halt, over 160 Taiwanese companies have had to suspend production. Ryan Kirkpatrick has this report.
As Shanghai's COVID-19 lockdown continues, some of its 26 million residents have now spent weeks confined to their homes, amid reports of food shortages and overwhelmed medical services. While this ongoing lockdown has taken a toll on residents, the government's so-called zero-COVID approach has also brought the country's economic and financial capital to a standstill. The mounting economic costs have led top leadership to weigh in, with Premier Yin Khvat this week calling for efforts to balance the epidemic response and economic development. His third such warning in less than a week.
China has a 5.5 real GDP target of this year. The lockdown in Shanghai, we were already expecting to shave off anywhere from 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points of that growth. That's going to make these economic targets very hard to get. And that's coming at a very awkward time because this is the year when the Chinese President Xi Jinping is aiming to secure a third term in office.
The Chinese Communist Party's pivotal 20th Congress happens later this year. And while China's hardline approach to controlling the virus initially attracted business leaders because of the relative normalcy at the height of the pandemic, this may no longer be the case.
Over the past couple of years, a lot of business executives were actually talking about maintaining or even expanding their footprint in China. And that's because China bounced back from the pandemic relatively quickly. I think a lot of that sentiment now is changing because we're now in a situation whereby the rest of the world is learning how to live with the pandemic. Economies are opening up. We're seeing things get back to normal. Critically, we have vaccines, we have the tools to know how to handle this virus and how to kind of effectively mitigate the disruptions that COVID is going to inevitably incur in our lives. But China's policies right now, to kind of paraphrase my colleague who gave an interview a couple days ago, we're using 2020 tools to combat a 2022 virus.
New COVID-19 cases have begun edging down in Shanghai, giving a glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel. But new lockdowns have continued to spring up in other parts of the country, leading to key ports and highways being closed.
What we're expecting right now is that the snarls that we're seeing in the Shanghai port are going to lead to volumes of goods that are going to be stuck, which then, when production inevitably comes back online, are going to create a situation where there's going to be a surge of products that ends up crashing against American and European shores. And that's going to worsen a lot of the congestion in supply chains that we've already been seeing and already been dealing with for the past year plus.
As China continues to grapple with COVID-19, many will be watching how the world's second biggest economy moves forward, or doesn't. Ryan Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan reported 663 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, including 551 local infections. With the latest wave of the pandemic showing no signs of slowing down, the government is adjusting its policies to prevent severe disruption. This includes relaxing the requirement for schools to stop classes for all students when multiple COVID cases are reported. Authorities are also encouraging everyone to download the Taiwan Social Distancing app, which will help with contact tracing as cases continue to grow. China has approved 45 new online games after an 8-month freeze. Beijing halted approvals of new games last year as part of what state media called a campaign to prevent gaming addiction among minors. This included limiting children to just 1 hour of gaming 3 days a week, but the policy has caused a downturn in the country's once flourishing gaming industry. The decision to approve new games saw US-listed stocks in one of China's biggest gaming companies, NetEase, rise by more than 2% on Monday, although no games from either NetEase or competitor Tencent were among those to be approved. Coming up, the art of the letterpress. We meet a master typesetter fighting to keep his craft alive.
In a changing world, when voices are being silenced, TaiwanPlus is listening. We tell those stories. No compromise, no boundaries,
people in Taiwan.
no fear.
I understudy Chinese. I'm Ryan Kilpatrick. Capital Taipei. TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The number of pet owners in Taiwan has increased, and so has the number of animals being abandoned by their owners. The government is now making plans to solve the problem, as Bing Wang reports.
This is Pui Pui Mokar, a Japanese anime series that was so popular in Taiwan that led to a rise in people buying guinea pigs, hamsters, and other rodents as pets. But now, it seems the mouse warming is over. Owners have started abandoning their pets, unaware that these furry animals are fast breeders. And the government has had to step in.
从鼠出生到它性成熟，大概是35到40天，它就有怀孕的能力。那它每21天就可以生一胎，差不多1个月之后，它的小朋友也都可以开始帮忙一起生产。
The Rodents Care Association says over 1,000 abandoned rodents are under their care, with many more left to run wild, where they starve to death or are attacked by bigger animals.
他来到协会的时候是瘫痪的状态，就是他主要是脊椎这个地方有一个折到。
Owners of other animals, such as turtles, reptiles, and birds, are also abandoning their pets, and there are few regulations to control this.
因为物种这么多，也不可能通通管，因为这也要兼顾到我们地方的行政量能跟所谓的商业的运作的实务。
To lessen the number of deserted animals, the Council of Agriculture is now putting plans in place to require pet owners to register certain types of animals. And hopefully with this new rule, these pets will have more of a Pui Pui Mokar life. As Naya Zhou and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Major protests took place in Indonesia on Monday, despite a denial by President Joko Widodo that he is seeking to extend his time in office.
Yang di belakang tolong diperketat. Yang di sebelah kiri saya tolong diperketat lagi.
In the capital, Jakarta, students marched on Parliament to protest high living costs and to oppose recent calls for Widodo to stay in power beyond the end of his second and final term in 2024. Prominent political allies of Widodo have raised the idea of delaying the 2024 presidential election or amending the constitution to allow him to run for a third term. The president on Sunday said the date of the election has been set and it will go ahead as scheduled. With a population of 260 million, Indonesia is the world's third largest democracy after India and the United States. Students have historically played a major role in the country's democracy movement. The Philippines says at least 24 people have been killed after tropical storm Megi hit the country, triggering mudslides and flooding. The central province of Leyte has been one of the hardest hit areas, with 21 deaths reported so far. Over 13,000 people have fled to emergency shelters, and officials say the storm has knocked out power and cut off roads. Megi is the first major storm to hit the Philippines this year, but comes just 4 months after a super typhoon killed over 400 people in the country. A third attempt is underway to free the Ever Forward, a Taiwan-operated container ship that's been stuck in the Chesapeake Bay in the United States for a month. The plan is to dredge 13 meters into the silt around the ship and then use barges to dislodge it. Workers have unloaded some of the ship's 5,000 containers to make it lighter. The 330-meter-long vessel is operated by Taiwan's Evergreen Marine Corporation. It ran aground on March 13th. The US Coast Guard says it is still unclear why the ship became stuck. Ever Forward's sister ship, Ever Given, got stuck in the Suez Canal last year, disrupting billions of dollars in trade. Movable type printing used to be a crucial technique for recording and passing on information. But with the invention of computers and the internet, the industry has all but disappeared. We meet a Taiwanese print master in the high-tech hub of Hsinchu, who is looking for a future home for his historical letterpress print machines.
博士读了做64年了，今年78岁啊，我是新竹县竹北市。因为乡下人嘛，艰苦啊，甲四岁大学毕业，我妈妈是讲，你学了手艺啦，学了手艺，你汉白，你是要出头的。就是开始上来台北跑演算了，I跳个没人因，以前都外国四路，跟因四台舞不能了嘞，你家有20年呢。水火做甲下是25年前，甲四代个电子嘛情况嘛，甲股票一般产品人甲。最辛苦是写档多，档好做，那现在单那个是没有嘛，2700万的，档好做啊，速度啊。田螺出来，田螺的田就树啊，田大去啊，实在冇落下来嘞。你有可能冇落，新冠病毒啊，全部冇谁要做。一礼拜做4日天天，冇办法，你系死台，真嘅。该分享会考出嚟，其实我同该观众啊，我讲。你请得会议，我记见不你，冇一件都见少睇嚟嘛。总之1000栋到2700人见，也做200人见嚟。因为铁路冇比密起嚟就错噶啦。就是原始嘛，要一半以上不是原始啊，田螺啊，田螺一打落用出去就做完啦。我试图拍板拍好咧。哦。咁啲對款啊。哦。哦，佢成本對款錯唔錯？
我對啊。
誒。 原始料冻过，卖米鱼啊，阵里有少啦，所以俺讲最坦白啦。因法版印刷要冇人做嘅，全部本機會做嘅，3萬人全部冇只，人哋唔係做大錢，但係都能喺度，差唔多做咗5年差唔多。5年度咧，辦咗啲先足大。
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Stay safe and see you next time.